Firstly, obviously, I'd like to say hi to everyone, and I'd like to say welcome and thank you for joining in. It's great to see um, some people that I know already in the audience section as well, and great to see diverse group of people. It's amazing what pandemic has done for us. Some good things, some bad things, but yeah, nonetheless, I think we're right here, and I'm glad to be speaking about something that is really uh, in, that has been very influential in my career. So today I'll be talking about founder to leader and building people-centric companies for scalability. So throughout my career, I've consulted many startups and founders, and I've realized that most challenges that they've faced, and including myself, it's been when the transition to change gears from a small company to probably scale a little bit. That is where we've actually found abundance of challenges. So I'm going to talk about that. Um, I'll be covering three areas to talk about this entire thing, where I believe founders need to focus the most or to transition into effective leader, to become an effective leader. We'll talk about founders and the necessary mindset and focus changes. We'll talk about how culture plays a critical role in cementing founders as great leaders, and some tips that I've picked up along the way in my career that has worked brilliantly for me. And finally, some tips on people practice that can allow founders to look into building a company that as soon as the founders start to scale with blitzkrieg speed. But before we talk about these three, let's understand what is the difference between a founder and a leader, and why should there be a transition anyway. So we all have our own understanding of what of who founders are and what's the definition of a leader. But here are my 2 cents on it. A founder is someone who has an idea and builds solely or jointly the formation of the idea into fruition. They take the idea from 0 to 1 and basically from nothing to something. That's my understanding of what a founder or a co-founder does, or who he is, or who they are. Being a founder is daunting, obviously, but amazing at the same time. It's a priceless experience, but not all founders are great leaders. Some of us are introverts, some of us are not so great at people management and people skills and social skills. A leader is someone who understands that he's not a product leader, but a people leader. A leader builds a process of investing in human capital and scales his idea into the large vision he had when he started as a founder. They take their idea from something to that great thing. That's a leader. Founders move from starting up to scaling up. They move from directing simple tasks to coaching people and processes and understanding that their their role is almost of a coach. They move from product first mentality and move towards people first understanding. So, an example I'd like to give here is, you know, an example of why founders need to change gears to cope up in the scaling phase is the episode of Travis Kalanick, founder of Uber, back in 2017. He lashed out on one of his own Uber drivers when probably was given an honest feedback by the driver. It could be about pricing or something that probably ticked him off. But after the fiasco, Travis publicly said, "This is the first time I've been willing to admit that I need leadership help, and I intend to get it." It's a tough transition. It's a tough time. Talking about the needs of the hour. Starting up at first, uh, with a team of 2 or 3, informal conversations between the founders and the team happen organically and frequently. That is how it is, and it usually works. The focus is on building a robust product and finding the product market fit, and rightfully so. That should be the focus at that point. Until now, the founder has been grappling with product problems and trying to assess market needs. But scaling up, that's another problem. It rises the complexity in all directions. Once they've got the fundamentals of the product right, the market wants what they're building, and everyone's happy. Finally, they're doing what successful businesses do. They begin to scale. But the founder possibly goes into building one product from one location to many products from many locations. So that's a big change, which means quickly they have to set up business functions like technology, product, finance, marketing, and HR. They start putting hierarchies in place and formalizing communication. There is a need for them to hire experienced and more senior people than themselves. And as the business begins to grow, investors expect more than linear returns. There is more at stake at every round of the funding, and the founder is answerable to board members for decisions made. So basically, it's a pressure situation for founders. Where and how to direct the focus in the transition phase is the foremost challenge any founder has to go through. Most entrepreneurs assume that if they launch a successful business, scaling it will be relatively easy. I admit that even I was in that phase, and even I had that understanding that launching a startup would be such a badge of honor. I mean, that's where you start, and scaling should be very easy. I mean, once you go through the first 2 years, scaling should not be a problem once you get funding, once you get investment. But you have to understand it's it's never that easy. You have to understand that founders have to grow before they grow the startup. They have to learn a few things, and they have to upskill themselves. So most entrepreneurs assume if they launch a successful business, scaling it will be relatively easy, but the opposite is true. Starting a new venture is relatively easy because the enthusiasm that you and your co-founding team and people around you feel at the start gives you that momentum that sustains you. I call that the honeymoon period. And when that honeymoon period ends, and it will end, it's not easy to know what to do next. And suddenly your startup strengths can be scale-up liabilities. And I'd like to give one example here. When we started up, we had a team of about 2 to 4 people, and I and my co-founder. At that point of time, there was no CEO. We both were just co-founders, and we had this open door policy, and we had this. We were in one room. I don't know why we had that open door policy, but we called it an open door policy, and we had no calendars. Um, and that worked because the communication flow was so transparent that it added to our advantage when we were trying to build something up, when we were trying to just launch and start and just see where we go with that. But as soon as we had to scale, and it was within a few months, we had to go from 4 to probably 40. And the same policy created so much of chaos that in the end, this idea of being cool and probably being very open and welcoming, um, this open door policy actually resulted in the culture that got built in the company. And impromptu meetings happen all the time. There was no set pattern. That is why the same thing that worked for us while starting up did not actually work at all while we were trying to grow. It actually created a lot of problems. So we had to just go back, change our culture, change our understanding of how we want to work, and learn very quickly how things would go forward from there. So we have now discussed about why and how it's critical for founders to transition. And rather quickly, it's time to talk about the founders themselves and their mindset to enable this transition. From focusing on the product single-mindedly in the foundation days to rapidly picking up skills, gaining knowledge, getting the capability to be a people leader, it all can be too daunting. So how can the founders transition smoothly into this scale phase to becoming a leader? Let's talk about people. I think this is the most important understanding of for founders to acknowledge while becoming a leader and while becoming someone who can actually lead a good scalable company. Growth is the lifeblood of startups. Startups need it, investors demand it. It is the stuff of the dreams and nightmares. But what is it that we all are so desperate to grow? Is it reach? Is it leads? Uh, App downloads, monthly active users? It should be probably subscriptions or revenue. Well, most growth focuses on product traction, trying desperately to convert that hockey stick curve that you promised to your investors into reality. We've all been there, and some of you will reach to that point. Once you just say it out to your investors, you just want that to become the reality, and you keep chasing that dream. But the question is, can you do that alone? What do you do without having the right people? What do you do without trusting your people and your people trusting you? Can you just be an introvert and just do your work and not worry about what other people are doing, whether they're fitting in your ecosystem or not? Growth starts with your team because you need marketing, PR, managers, CXOs, tech team, finance, and lastly, HR. So if we are to sum it all up, the core of the most critical element for any founder is becoming a people leader. Second, know your weaknesses. The biggest trap for all founders is that I, in fact, as a founder, believe that I am great at every function of the startup since day one because it's my baby. It has been my baby from day one, and I think I pretty much know what kind of marketing do I need, what kind of influences would I want, and what is the right approach to market something. This unknowingly is the biggest blocker for founders to move forward. You have to know what you have to know what you don't know. Recognize that. Know when you're playing to your strengths. Know when you're playing to your weaknesses, and frame your weaknesses as opportunities to develop. Don't be afraid of asking for help, because no great company is built by a single individual. It just not it's just not possible. I certainly took help from my own developers teaching me how to build an app, whereas I did start the company and I did not know how to build an app. When I did, uh, my developers obviously, and the first thing that came to my mind was, should I be egoistic? Should I show them my weakness or not? And there were certain people who probably did take advantage of that situation, but I'm glad to say that that was such a big learning curve for me. And I put all the ego and didn't even think about how it probably would be shaming for me to just say that I'm the founder of this startup and probably an app development company and doesn't know how to develop an app. Uh, well, that lasted for a little while till we reached a point where the same developers and the same team started to come to me for advice on how to sort things up and how to build products correctly. Third, empowering others. This is big. This is huge. I think from starting up to scaling up, this is the biggest problem that one of the biggest problems that, if I may say that, founders face. Uh, you know your weaknesses now, right? We've just discussed about that. If you can acknowledge your weaknesses, so that means you can give work to people where you are weak and people who can deliver, not just to people who are free. um, Empowering means delegating responsibility and authority, not just your task. It just cannot be one task. It has to be the entire function. Your thousand hats should literally mean roles, not tasks that you delegate. Um, Managers who fail to delegate responsibility, or founders who fail to delegate responsibility in addition to specific tasks, eventually find themselves reporting to their subordinates and doing some of their work rather than vice versa, because you're so engrossed in getting something done correctly, you're so involved, that you think that you are the only person who can actually get this done correctly, and you end up doing their work. And an example here would be probably when you start scaling up, you would need to hire a people manager, because that is the biggest thing that you would be doing, hiring people and managing people. So when you do have a people manager, founders tend to actually interfere a lot, and they do not actually empower the people managers correctly in the beginning. Some learn and they thrive. Some do not learn and they kind of fail. Um, since obviously the people manager is going to be involved in the first few early hires, setting up the processes, setting up the first policies, is talking about um, setting up the right type of rewards and compensation. As founders, you tend to get involved in everything, but there's a difference between getting involved and empowering others. Getting involved means that I might take a report and give my feedback to my people manager and say, I probably don't like this, let's work towards this. However, if you actually are ending up doing everything and giving all the ideas and discarding all the ideas that your people manager is getting into, and maybe you're selecting and deselecting everything that your people manager is supposed to do, you're not empowering anyone. Fourth, taking advice is a skill. Um, Taking advice can literally be treated as a skill. You have to learn to be good at it. Some advices will be bad. In fact, most, but some will be great. Some people will be there, will be great at giving you an advice, and that would work for you. And some won't. Don't be afraid of taking an advice just because something didn't work. You have to understand that it is a skill. You have to be good at it. Great founders have great mentors, but they do not take every advice that the mentor gives. Some advice probably applies to your startup, some would not. And you have to be the judge of that. Your network will determine the quality of advice you receive, so cultivate it properly. Learn judgment about good advice versus bad advice. For example, one of the best advice that I got when I was scaling up was to never stop taking interviews, even though there is no open vacancy available. What it did was, and I did not understand at the time, but what it did was, it actually uh, allowed our team members to understand that we will only hire people and we'll keep hiring people, we'll keep the process open, uh, but we'll only accept the best as long as it takes. So we were not hiring in a rush, in a hurry. Early on, that was very important, and it did allow us, while taking interviews all the time, even though we did not have vacancy open. What it did was it allowed us to get access to great talent. Whenever there was some talented team member who would come along and just some candidate would come along and be great in the interview, we would just hop on and take this guy over, or for that matter, take that candidate completely, convince that person to join our team. And that allowed us to have a great core team in the beginning. So you have to understand what kind of advice would work for your startup and what advice would not. It's a skill. Treat it as a skill, and work on it. Fifth, go full speed. I know we speak about how too much of this can break things, and it can lead to failure. But my point of view about this is, too much of narrowed focus on the product and its metrics and probably the processes of the company and how something should work and something should not work. You can just forget about, in that entire zone for founders, you can just completely forget about that. Speed is crucial. Speed is your number one advantage. It is both your number one and number two indication of your eventual success. I've seen founders getting too stuck on perfection and uh, building features upon features, uh, but but not launching the MVP or the first version that they should be. Rapid product beats the competition. Rapid results build team morale. leading to even more results that generates more interest from the press, customers, prospective buyers, etc. Rapid results increase valuation. And in my experience from founders from enterprises who have been managing teams for over 10 years, 5 years, who've worked with corporates, in corporates, um, I think they tend to do this. So I would suggest to not do this. Um, for them, getting an approval for something probably would take usually 2 weeks. So when they get into that startup culture, when they do found something, they start something up, for them approving something probably from 2 weeks moves to 1 week. They still feel it's quick enough, but they have to understand, and everyone needs to understand this. This is not how startup atmosphere works. Your competition will outbeat you for sure. So you have to understand your features and your other stuff, and your perfection can come in later. Speed is important. Speed doesn't mean that you move parallelly, open new avenues, open new services, and build more products. It just means that whatever you're doing with your narrowed focus, just ship it with full speed. Learning loops. Startups are learning machines, and you can consistently work on improving it to deliver better with each iteration. You have to understand that startups are just like products, just like that. Since startups work in iterations, also, the biggest question you can ask yourself is how can you make sure that your startup and your team is a learning one, and your next iteration is going to be better than the previous one. Fix a system, fix some dates, fix an idea. It could be monthly, quarterly, half yearly. Do a full check and see what worked and what didn't work. Make an understanding of what you're supposed to launch as a startup. What kind of branding? What kind of marketing? Uh, would you want a partnership system? Would you want some cultural extra efforts to be made? Keep a check of a few things through all functions, and do launch it, or feel that you're launching various iterations of it. Keep tweaking things. Nothing would work perfectly in the first go. No marketing campaign would go. No branding would stand out. No employer branding or your rewards or compensation would work the way you think that would work. So iterations for everything is basically cumulatively your startup iterations. Talking about learning loops. Now that we've spoken about founders and their transition, let's talk about the second focus area of the talk today, which is how people practice and culture impacts companies, and how founders should focus on it to attain success. So, what is people practice? What is culture? People practice has 5 pillars and revolves around people management as a whole, with culture lying right under it all. In all departments, in all pillars, in all segments, all functions, culture is everywhere. How you hire, how you onboard, how you train your team, how you design the structure to ensure fast speed in decision making. That's all that's a part of people practice. But I want to start with culture first. People think of culture as something that they would take care of later and treat it as not so important in the early years. If not early years, then I would say early few months, and with early few core team members joining in. But I believe culture exists from day one, even with a team of two or three people. Culture is how people behave as a group, how they say yes to things, how they say no to things. Uh, so yeah, let's talk about some points that I think a founder needs to keep in mind about culture while scaling. Culture is like flossing. A few minutes of attention each day will save you from painful, costly, and time-consuming crisis down the line. I've personally experienced this, and I can tell you that one of the weirdest things that I've seen and I've noticed with great founders that I've been honored to get mentored from, um, is that they are almost in a loop. They're almost in a loop, saying and repeating the same stuff about their values and what they stand for, what the company stands for, again and again, till it becomes almost an internal company-wide religion. You start living and breathing those values. You start believing it. It's almost like military or army-like culture. That starts to reflect from your people policies to the branding to the website, even your meetings. Your values start to stand out, so just keep at it. And spending a little time every day, by not ignoring that you probably have someone else to manage this, a little time every day would save you an abundance of chaos and problems later. Ship your values. To make your cultural values real, you must ship them like a product. You must treat your company values as a knowledge transfer, as if you would do a knowledge transfer from one developer to another developer about the code. You have to document it and you have to ship it. And understand this, top startups grow by over 100% headcount when they're scaling up, almost every year. So many of your employees are hearing your values for the first time. It's important for them to understand what those values are. Encourage everyone at your company to almost over communicate values. I promise this is time that will never be found as wasted. You have to yourself and ask other people to make sure that you keep talking about the values that you believe in, that you stand for as a group. Strong cultures have strong onboardings. As we were discussing, highly successful companies move fast and grow fast. So having a repeatable plan for onboarding new hires is critical. Use this as an opportunity as a founder to tell your company story. Personally explain the origin of each of the company's values and its significance to you and to the company. Trust me, if you are not doing that in the on the first day or the second day with that colleague of yours who's just joined, who's just been onboarded, if you do not make that person understand each of the values that you have laid out for your startup as a group, as a founder, you will be failing. That person, that colleague will not take that full understanding, take that full knowledge transfer. It will not be shipped correctly. You have to be the storyteller in chief. Forget about chief executive officer or some founder. You have to be the storyteller in chief. You have to understand that part. Finding your North Star. One of my mentors told me once that stayed with me, and I've applied that many times in my career actually. There are certain things that are written with pencil, and there are a few that are permanently written in ink. But of course, I mean in terms of your values as a startup, as a company. I'm talking about your culture, your basically principles and rules and values, underlying values. Pick a clear North Star. It's like a guiding star in the sky. We're not talking about your North Star metric. Do not get confused about that. I'm just saying it's like an anchor. Pick your North Star. Just it's not about just picking KPIs, but about understanding what one thing you're trying to achieve, so that you won't be distracted or led astray when things change its course. What is that one thing that takes you back, that you all stand for, regardless of any policy change or compensation rewards change or something like that? Startups change their direction. I've seen some companies who started as a service company, I would say like Basecamp. 37 Signals was basically a service company. It was a web design studio, and it pivoted into a product company. Startups change their direction, business models change, strategies change, and markets change. And as your business matures, it may make sense for some of those values to be changed. It's okay to tweak a few of those values as long as they are aligned. For example, at Applify, one of the values that we have as a North Star is earn trust. Earn trust of our clients, earn trust of our employees. Our employees should earn trust of the company. And that we may change different rules and policies and understanding and processes, but that never changes. Everything that we do, from our branding to our maybe our website, or maybe our proposals, or how we interact with the team and how we build our processes, it's always around that. It's always we always make sure that we have that North Star right in the middle, and we understand as a group. If you can't measure culture, you can't manage it. So culture should be measured and monitored. I don't know if people would believe that or not, but I certainly do. You measure its progress and its status. It keeps you in check of the culture at your own startup and allows you to think with more perspective when you have to. Your culture check can be done by tracking things like employees being overly defensive, and your clients raising too many complaints, or you hearing the bad news. In the end, you're the last person to hear that. That means, nobody's being very transparent, or they don't trust to tell you stuff. So you have to understand these are certain parameters that I think are a few of the parameters that you can create your own parameters as well. Will allow you to keep a check on the culture, because if you do not check it, you will be too late. You will be having so many people joining in, but having to fix your culture first, and your values first, and then allow them to come, it would be too much of chaos. So you have to be prepared, you have to measure it and monitor it constantly. And lastly, this is the last area of focus in my talk today, and it's an important one. I know some technical founders run away from this and kind of outsource this part to someone else completely. They're not interested in managing people as such. They're not interested in how talent acquisition is done, how talent development is supposed to be. They're interested in building products, and they're interested in marketing the product, and that's about it. But that would be a complete mistake. Know this: you may outsource your culture and values with this. So this is important in the founder's journey. If you outsource this part completely and forget about it, you will also outsource your culture and your values. You have to be a part of this. You have to build it with your team. Let's talk about startups. Entropy. So entropy is the tendency of ordered systems to move towards disorder if left unattended. All organized systems are like this. So from startups and societies to even your sock drawer, it will be disorganized if you leave it unattended. You have to continually work to maintain them, or they'll fall into disarray. Chaos is the natural equilibrium here. We can't blame chaos. It will happen. How we manage that and how we control that, how we create a system around it, it's important. Why am I talking about entropy? You have to understand, if you do not build the right rituals in the company right from day one, what are you celebrating? What are you not celebrating? Are you celebrating a milestone success, or you're not? Are you celebrating someone who's just joined your team, or not? Is someone who you've hired, or who is working with you from day one, who built something with you together, is that person the right fit to take you from 1 to 10? He was there, or she was there from 0 to 1, but can that person still do a great job to take the startup from 1 to 10? So you have to understand that there is a system that needs to be in place. You cannot be very chilled out. You cannot think that, oh, I may be too pokey. Nobody's asking you to be pokey. Nobody's asking you to be very intrusive. All I'm saying is that you have to have a system. You have to keep a check. That's why in ancient times there was religion, different religions. It was keeping all the societies and all the different regions and people organized. They had rules. So that's what I'm getting at. You have to find your own rules. You have to find your own rituals. Talent acquisition. So this is actually very, very critical. You're hiring people in growth phase, and that's how you kind of start with everything. Anything that needs to be done, you need people for that. So building the right talent acquisition system at an early stage is crucial. Your early hires and your core team hiring depends on it. It's important to set the right process to further choose and hire the right set of people. Don't forget, every candidate is your startup's brand ambassador eventually. Here's a quick check on talent acquisition that you can do yourself. You have to understand whether your team is hiring within 45 days or not. If this is one of the examples, maybe there are low employee referrals, maybe someone is not into it. So you have to keep a check on everything and understand that you have to build a system where employees are referring other other team members, other candidates, and your hiring process is happening within 30 days or 45 days. Because when you would need someone, if they get onboarded, hired and onboarded on time, you will not rush into hiring bad people, or I wouldn't say bad people, but rush into hiring and then later regret it. So you have to keep this part, build a system around it where you can, after you build it with your people manager, you can simply delegate that authority. You can simply walk away, empower your people manager. You have that system, you've been a part of building that system, and then you can give away that power. Talent development. Employees know they are cared for when they know what, where, and how their career is moving. This is absolutely true, because the team that you will build your startup with, 4 people, 5 people in the beginning, I would say even 10, you have to understand, if we're talking about multi-million dollars, we're talking about scaling up to a level which goes through multiple rounds of funding. You have to upskill yourself, right? And you also have to understand that the talent that was there with you, if you want them, if that team trusts you and you trust that team, and you think nobody is going to be better, you have to develop that talent. Show the employee their career path. Show the employee the skills or behavior gap they need to cover to move to the next level, so they can upskill. Reward them, appreciate them when they should be. There has to be mechanism for that. And this mechanism kind of becomes a guide document for talent acquisition. This is what your people manager would actually come back and say to potential candidates, that hey, we hire you, but eventually we will develop your career. This is the path, this is what we do. So talent development needs to start from day one. Don't forget that. It's like uh, probably other versions of the product that you may be working on. This is also one of the things that you should be starting from day one, and it cannot be done at a later stage when it's already too late. Designing a company that works. I can't stress enough how important this is. This has to be carefully looked upon and planned, not for today, but for the future. It happens gradually, of course, and totally depends on what kind of startup it is. Maybe it's a logistic one, maybe it's an online one, it's completely remote. It has to be obviously tailor-made. Um, but it happens gradually when people and functions expand, and to eradicate decision-making bottlenecks, you end up designing the structure that suits your company. I go back to the point now that I made earlier. When an early stage startup moves on to more than one product and one location. So we're talking about multiple products and multiple locations. So without a orchestrated company design, you'd see conflicts, unclear roles, people overlapping each other's roles, gaps in capabilities. Other issues will become a pretty much a norm. So you have to understand there's a check that you should be doing. Uh, it's not that difficult. There will be people around you who would also help build this, but it's very critical. As founders, we wait for this. We wait for rewards and benefits and compensation for the employees. I mean, something that I think as founders we boast about. We have free this and free that in ESOPs and stuff like that. So we love shiny things and perks, but it has to be set up rationally. Once you set, you cannot go back. You have to understand that if you've given something to someone as a team member, as a compensation or a reward, it's set in ink. You cannot take it back. It will spoil the entire thing. It will spoil the culture. People would not like it. New guys would not join you because then you don't stand for your word. So whatever you say yes to in the beginning, it has to be carefully thought through. Just don't jump on the gun first. Startup goes from basic pay to adding rewards in this phase, of course, and the phase to going from 1 to 2. It's great to have small market mapping exercise. It's always best to understand what's going on, and what are the few rewards that are being given in the market. And so you map around that and you make your own reward system. And finally, to summarizing my thoughts today, I truly believe that founders, in order to upskill themselves, should start believing that their team is the final product. It's their product, and the best product will definitely win. You want to build a nice product, a tech product, you need people for that. So you have to understand that your team is the actual product. While building their companies from start to scale, founders definitely should plan for the future, then start with the burning issues of today. Almost every day, just a quick 15-minute thing. Become an exceptional developer of talent. Build your network. Understand how you can nurture people. You can take the best talent out of them. Taking advice and upskilling yourself first before your team does. It's important. Don't be a hypocrite. You have to do it first. You don't know something, just acknowledge it, learn it. And lastly, double down on onboarding to set your new hires up for success. That is the only way what you envision building as a company will be carried through. You cannot alone do it. Your team will have to do it. So you have to be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ojas. That was such a great session. I know that we've already had some comments just being super grateful for everything that you said, and some really great gold nuggets that a lot of us haven't heard before. So we really appreciate it. If you don't mind, just a couple minutes.
The question that you popped up, I actually wanted to do that in the beginning of the session, which was, how many scaling stage founders are there at the moment, but I couldn't do that. So yeah, interested to know that as well. So yeah, let's pop up some questions.
Perfect, great. Well, first of all, Alexis had just posted one in the general chat, so I'll get to that one first before heading over to the actual Q&A. She said, what is your number one regret, and what would you tell your younger startup self to avoid that regret?
Yeah, I'm actually in the process of building a no-code stealth startup. I can't actually tell you exactly what it is, but it's a no-code startup. And I'm grateful that you asked that question, because a few days back also I was thinking about this. The biggest regret that I think I have is that I did not set my culture, my company's culture, right from day one. I thought I can do it. I can do it later, maybe when we have like about 10 people. I did not even understand what culture is. It's just how you behave. So, and as a group, what your values are. And when we were growing as a company, it was too much of chaos and too much of friction. Some of the guys who joined in were great, talented people, but did not understand what we stood for. Earning trust and giving customer satisfaction as one of our few values, which was at the core of what I was building with my co-founder. They just could not understand that. So it was more of 9 to 5 and doing the job for them. Eventually, it became too robotic. So that is my biggest regret, which I don't think I will regret ever, and I don't think anyone should kind of take it for granted that culture can be done later. It starts from day one.
I think that speaks to your point that you were saying earlier, that you had that diagram and it was, did you fail and learn? And if you failed and learn, you didn't necessarily fail, because you kind of pick up the pieces and always learn from that.
Exactly.
We have Rajat asking for recommendations on impromptu meetings. He recognizes that they hamper work, but also solve problems for team members. Remote teams definitely need assistance every now and then. He's not looking for an answer to avoid them, but recommendations on how to manage the workaround.
Yes. So we had this problem. And to be honest, I think rather than, obviously, different things work for different startups. We don't know what kind of cultural group how diversified they are and what kind of work environment is going on. But I would recommend something like setting up time. I mean, it's as basic as that. Just set up, if it doesn't work once, set up 2 times, 2 slots. So for us, we actually had a daily stand-up meeting just to take a status update of what happened yesterday, and then we have a water cooler chat, which is when the entire we used to where we had the entire company come in and just kind of pitch in and kind of talk about that, venting out stuff for like about 15 minutes or 10 minutes. During the day end, we just wherever the team required that impromptu thing where we thought problems are occurring within that team, we set up another meeting by day end. If not meeting, our product owners just basically said that, look, drop your questions, we'll talk about those questions in the morning. Stand-up meeting, even if that stand-up meeting takes a much longer time. So I know I've been there. These impromptu meetings actually waste a lot of time, but they obviously are coming from an angle that they need help. What you should, as a founder, enforce is that whatever questions or help they need, they should be noting it down and asking those questions in one go, instead of every now and then just dropping a message, which is very which is a big wastage of time.
Kind of like the in-office culture. If you have open door policy and people are constantly popping in throughout the day, and then your day is just taken away from small questions, it's kind of respecting each other's times and recognizing when to ask the questions and to set a meeting.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Do you have recommendations on how to have a strong onboarding for a fully remote company? And along those lines, how to keep culture consistent, fully remote?
Interesting question, actually. So obviously, we're right now, a few companies are trying fully remote, a few companies are trying hybrid. I think I've been a very strong advocate of strong onboardings, and we went on along to make a few extra efforts back in the day when even Indian companies were not even looking at that. So we created a full website for onboarding. We created your everything, your where do you get your coffee from, who enjoys what team member does what are their hobbies. You want to join a group, you can do that with someone. Let's say someone likes to play table tennis, they can do that. Someone likes to do cycling, right? Enjoy cycling, you can join a group. So there were group admins on WhatsApp, so their numbers and everything. So we had it all. It's not a big thing. Just go back to the basics, make a checklist of what you would think as an employee would want. Always understand, as a founder, you have to keep in mind, would you work for your own startup? Do you like working for your own startup or not? If not, please change yourself. Please change your policies. Please change your system, whatever you want to do. So I always go back to, do I want to work for this startup? Do I enjoy? Do I like the onboarding? Do I like the culture and everything? So we made a proper onboarding website and things like that around that. And I would say, just don't look for these ideas online. It would come to you naturally. Not every set of not your team is not the same as probably someone in the US. It's just not going to work out. That person has just put up an article. You cannot find that. You'll have to think about it. So, and you don't even have to make an extra effort to be cool. Not everyone should be cool or trying to look for some cool stuff. Just don't have to do that. Just think what works for them, and don't go for team bonding and all those activities. It doesn't work. Team bonding happens organically. Just be natural with each other. Just be authentic with each other.
That's a really, really good point, because sometimes team bonding can just be a fail in some senses, and obviously a waste of people's time, and that's not what you want. It's almost like forcing culture, and really, to your point, it's going to be with the values of the founders and the leadership, and if it's not forced, or if it is forced, and it just won't succeed. So it's a really good point. We just had Carl pop in and say, do you have experience with outsourced teams, and do you have advice on how to work in the culture for them?
Well, yeah, I have abundance of experience. Applify does outsource tech work. So we have, that is what the entire startup is about. So I didn't get the last part. Experience with outsourced team and
how to work in the culture with them.
Yeah, I think if you want to make something of that engagement as a success, you do not have to worry too much about making sure if they're doing the right job. I think fearful psychology plays a big part on how wrong engagements could go. In my life, I do not have fearful psychology. I'm a very positive and optimistic person. It doesn't mean that you don't do your due diligence. So you have to set up a system. I would recommend, as a from the technical understanding, do a daily stand-up. Most of the outsourcing teams run away from it because they don't want to tell you what's happening behind the curtain. Just take a daily status update. You don't have to be you don't have to hire a project manager or a product owner. You can just simply do a simple basic check of, all right, I'm supposed to get something 15 days later, or fortnight later. There's a milestone, or there's a sprint delivery that I have. Where are we? So basically, ask your outsource team's product manager, what is the daily target? Basically, they usually divide 2 weeks work into daily work, and then just track that, get on a call with your team, understand what they're doing. If they're getting stuck, if they understand what you're saying, I guarantee it will be a success. You won't fail. And then, unless you've chosen an outsourcing partner which does not have good talent. Simple, period. There are many. If you're going for a cheap option, I can tell you the cheaper option will come through interns or junior associates that will not do your job correctly. Development is like building a house. You want the best stuff, otherwise just understand it's a costly affair, yes, but it will make you a huge difference, heaps of difference. And so yeah, I mean, just to make sure that you are on track of understanding how that would work, just make sure that their product owner is well versed in communication. And I'm just not saying English, I'm saying uh, transparency. Just understand what you're saying, and that person understands what you're saying, and you understand what that person is trying to tell you. So everyday checkup should do the job.
That's great. It's a really great recommendation. And I'm sure one that people shy away from, daily stand-ups and just daily meetings to try and get on the same page. So
Basic stuff, as you would do it with yourself. I mean, 5 minutes is 5 minutes. What's my day like? So you can just ask the team, what's your day like? Are we on track for this? That's it. 10 minutes. Nothing crazy.
that's really good advice. Sorry, just reading another question that just popped up here. You talked a lot about getting the buy-in from your team, the buy-in and the purpose of the company. When you are hiring new talent, how can you tell if they believe in your purpose?
Well, you don't, and you will not find people who will come along and say, hey, I know what you're doing, I love what you're doing. If someone says that from get-go, I'm telling you that person is faking the interview. So just you are the most passionate person in the startup. You are the founder. So don't expect everyone else to be with the same energy. It's your job. When you hire the right talent. That's what your job is. You hire the right talent and an optimistic attitude, a person with an optimistic attitude, someone who can gel in well, and that's about it. Everything else, as I mentioned, it's your job as a founder. You have to build that. You have to allow the team to trust each other. The moment they trust each other, and they have small wins, right, and some rituals that you've built in the culture, you celebrate small stuff, they will trust you. They will become a part of culture. They will become your biggest brand ambassadors. But don't expect someone else to just randomly come up and say, hey, I'm your biggest brand ambassador, I love your company. They'll just take your money and go away after 6 months or something, for sure.
Yeah, that's it's unfortunately happens probably frequently. So as long as everybody here is listening, try and avoid that part of it.
Yeah,
Months
100%.
wasting your time.
And I understand. I mean, as startup founders, we're so passionate that someone long comes on and says something like that, you just feel like, all right, this is the person that I was waiting for. I got you. So just don't go for that. Don't fall for that. It's probably I shouldn't be saying that, but that's almost scam. You can't expect someone else to believe in your dream as much as you do.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's go with one last here, and then if anybody has any dire questions, feel free to pop them up. We just have a couple minutes left here. So we have Mart that said, what are examples of non-people-centric companies? So obviously the title, Building People-Centric Companies. He said, isn't a group of people coming together a company by definition?
It is, of course, but when I say building people-centric companies, I'm saying people-focused.
Mm-hmm.
Are we forgetting that about 5 years back, or maybe 7 or 8 years back, we were all not so much into employee rewards and employee compensation and this cool startup culture? I mean, this was just in Silicon Valley. How did it all expand into India, Indonesia, and all the startup hubs? Because we are believing in who builds a company, people. That's it. See, so I would say there were so many HR policies and rules, and they were all controlled by the HR manager and the HR department, that you would end up following those rules. Does that sound like a people-centric company? And founders were only talking about assets and profits and losses in their balance sheets. No one mattered. If someone was talking abruptly in a meeting, that person probably was fired without even a thought. There was a corporate culture that people were accustomed to. Now it's a very different thing. It's all about gelling with people. It's all about compassion, and you have to understand, since that culture changed, you've seen more unicorns than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to understand, people-centric teams actually get you great results. They believe in the same idea. Why do we even talk about teams? And back in the day, we were only talking about single founders. Today, we're talking about teams. For example, if I was working with Airbnb, or maybe I would say Uber, that would pop up on my resume, and that would mean something right now. And if I was coming from a great people-centric company, it would be such a big difference for the next employer. Whereas if I was coming from a company which is proper corporate, right? I don't want to name any companies. I'm sorry, I don't want to name any companies, but there's so many business consulting groups and corporates out there that probably still have that corporate culture going on. You can't expect people coming from them. And in my experience, I've seen that personally. People from those companies come in and expect the same stuff. They do not understand startup culture. They do not understand why is someone handing over free, I mean, maybe free beers or free pizza, like random, like what's going on? It's as simple as that. It's as small as that. So people-centric companies, I would say, is mainly focused on how people and teams behave with each other. And for example, Google would be a people-centric company for sure. Letting people do whatever they want and not asking what you did 9 to 5 and what's happening. No punch in, no punch out. I mean, you have your milestones. I mean, quarterly, of course, but you're free. You're welcome to do whatever you want and look at the results. Look at the results. I mean, we're talking about experimental projects like that has come up. Gmail is an experimental project, and so is Hangouts and stuff like that. So that versus other companies, I don't want to name other companies, but I hope I've given my answer. I hope I'm clear.
Definitely. I think it's the old Wall Street model versus the Googles of the world, and it's adapting and moving forward and empowering your employees. I do have to wrap up because I'm introducing another speaker. But Ojas, thank you so much for your time. As I said, this was an awesome session. I know it's late your time, so thank you. And thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you, everyone. It's my pleasure. I'm so honored. Thank you, Wendy.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.